In part one on the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah takes a leisurely boat tour on Lake Lure in the mountains of North Carolina. Roger sets up his easel on the dock and uses acrylics to paint a lake scene with surrounding shoreline.
One thing very nice about being in the mountains of western North Carolina is the beautiful lakes that you can find here and there. And Captain John is going to take us out on his pontoon boat, and we'll take a look around at some of the beautiful buildings. There are boathouses and summer cottages and lots of pretty things to see. And the nice thing about the pontoon boat is it has a motor that just gives a little hum, not too loud.
Well, it's an overcast day here on this lake, and I like the overcast because it really gives me a chance to paint outside much more comfortably than in the sun. When the sun is out, the light changes so very frequently that it's hard to paint, but on an overcast day like this, the light will remain the same for quite some time. So I'm going to get started. I have an 11 by 14 inch masonite board here, and I've toned it with a combination of some chromium oxide green and some burnt sienna just to get rid of that white tone. And so much of this is green in here that this will give me a little bit of a start. All right, on my palette I have titanium white, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow light, alizarin crimson, cadmium red light, 3 earth colors of burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and burnt umber. And I also have some greens out here today. This is chromium oxide green, sap green, and a color they call green gold. I'm just going to mix up just a dark color here with some, doesn't really matter which colors, just as long as it's a dark color, just to get some of my drawing started. This is just a beautiful scene. I love the way this tree is just hanging over the water here. Don't need too much drawing, and we have these beautiful mountains in the background. Now I want to be sure I keep my horizon line somewhere below the center. I don't want to divide this canvas in half, or this board in half. So I'll put the horizon line down here somewhere. And we have the mountains in the background. Gosh, I just love those mountains. They're such a beautiful color. Now the water is going to change quite a bit as I paint here, because the ripples and the action on the water will change how it looks. So I don't have to worry about that quite yet, but that is going to change quite a bit as opposed to the light, which I think will remain quite a bit the same throughout this painting. I think I will put this boathouse right up above the horizon slightly. As I look at it, it's below the horizon, but I don't want to have all my hard subject matter down here. I want that to sort of intersect with this part of the painting. So I'm going to raise this part of the boathouse up here. Now also I want to try and divide this painting into thirds. So we've got a line here, so this is approximately a third, not quite, but close enough. And then our hard subject matter over here, we'll put that, see, this will be divided into like thirds here. So our other subject matter will be right in here with this boathouse. So we'll put that boathouse right there. Now I do want to leave enough room for these nice reflections down here. So maybe I'll jump that up just slightly. Okay, there's our boathouse. That's pretty much all the drawing I need for this painting to start with. That just gives me a composition. going to pick up a larger brush, and I think I will start with my darks, which I usually do. So I'll take my sap green, I'll just grab it into, a number of colors here. I'll take some red, and I'll just make these very dark areas back here. And then I'll work from dark to light as I usually do. Now I am using acrylics today, so these are going to dry. If I were using the oils, then my procedure would be somewhat different. I'll keep these nice and dark here to start with. Now, if I were using oils, I would probably apply this thinner just so I could keep applying paint over it. But this will dry very fast. Right under here we have this reddish color, this burnt sienna color. That's from the tannic acid from the leaves and things falling from the lake. So that's always a nice color to put right down here by the water where it's shallow. I'm not too worried about the colors so far. I'm basically want to get in this composition and the values of the painting, the lights and the darks. So that's what I need to establish right off, is these large patterns of light and dark. Here we've got the mountain back there. It's very blue. Now it's always a danger to painting these mountains to get them almost too blue. And they definitely do look blue as I look back there. But if I were to take a photograph of this, put it in Photoshop or something, and sample that color, it would be a lot grayer than you think. So I don't want to get that too awfully blue. I want to keep that a bit on the gray side. And of course, as these mountains go back, everything gets lighter and the contrast starts to fall away. Now, I will be changing these values as I go along, because it's really hard to establish the values in a painting accurately at the first part of the painting, because one color affects the other color, one value affects another value. So these areas have to be adjusted, at least for me. I have to adjust them all the time till I get them as good as I can. Now here we have some darker areas here of green, and that's in this middle ground up here. Now when I look at this middle ground of those trees back here in the distance, and if I squint my eyes, they are much paler. There's not nearly as much saturation in color in those mountains as there are right here in these foreground trees. And of course there's less and less as it goes back. So that's the color intensity really starts to fall off as the things go in the background. So I don't want to get this color here and this value too dark, because this is really where I want my darkest area of the painting. Trying to, guess at these as best I can for the values. And it really helps to squint my eyes when I look at this. It sort of blocks out all the major details so I can better see the large shapes. Well, I think I'll start up here with this sky now. It's a very warm sky back there. We'll take some of the yellow ochre, mix it with a bit of this blue. Now as I look at this, that's really the lightest part of my painting, but since it is an overcast day, I'm not sure I want to get that, terribly white, or, I want this to be a warm color, but not real white like that. That would be more of a sunny day thing. And when I'm using acrylics on the background like this, I try and apply them quite thick, because it gives me a little more time to blend these colors. Now as I go up higher, we have some overcast, and we do have a lot of clouds up there, so that is going to change. Okay, I'm using some burnt umber and cerulean blue just to get these gray areas of the sky. And I think it doesn't matter if I go into the tree here, because this is pretty much dry already. And I can just paint over that. I'll put enough color on here so I can blend these. Now as that sky changes, I'm just going to have to leave it where it is in order to get through with this painting, because it is scheduled to rain here a little bit later on. And of course I can always work on this back in the studio, which I often do. I love to be able to finish a painting out here right on location, but that's, for me, that's seldom an option. I always find that when I get back to the studio, I always can do a few more things to it that I didn't see or didn't realize while out here on location.
I'm glad I can share this mountain view with you. It's really quite extraordinary to be on the water and to look and see the beautiful outline of the mountains. I know they're not as tall as Swiss mountains, but it's that same lovely feel of being on the water and being surrounded, almost cradled by the beautiful scenes. Another nice thing about going on a lake is the wind, the breeze. It's a little hot and muggy today, even here in the mountains, but this breeze feels wonderful. Makes your hair go back, your ears go back. I've asked Captain John to give us a 360-degree spin so we can see what's surrounding us here. It is really beautiful. I want to share it. You can see just how many boathouses there are and how many homes have probably been owned for generations and improved upon year after year. A few windows added, perhaps an addition for another family member. It has a nice feel here, very pleasant. A nice cottage behind us. We had to take a close-up look. Well, there are lots of nice sports you can do right here on the lake, especially on a day like this when it's not particularly wavy, it's nice and flat. I've seen paddle boarders and kayakers, and I think this is probably my favorite sport on the lake right now. People of all ages can do this. Well, that was great, Captain John. You were one smooth boat driver. That was fun. Come on, let's go. Hurry up. Come on. Oh, yeah. Successful first trip.
Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to take just a light touch of my brush and feather this out just to get these nice soft edges here. And this is already tacking up. It's already setting up on me. Now, as these clouds go back in the distance, there's a perspective to clouds. So you've got larger clouds up here towards the horizon. As they go back, they keep getting smaller and smaller and thinner and thinner. And I don't see too much of that, but we'll suggest some of that right in here. Okay, we have this green water down here. Now, this is basically a reflection from the mountain itself. And the strange thing about reflections like this in the water, if we have a dark object in the water, it generally reflects slightly lighter than the object. If we have a light object in the water, the reflection will be a little bit darker. And that's pretty evident in some of these boathouses and things. Right over here, I see a white door on a boathouse, and the reflection under that boathouse door is darker. One thing I try and do to a painting is try and get the whole painting covered as quickly as I can, just so I don't have any areas left untouched. So this is a tough color down here. It's very difficult really to know what color that is. It's very Sort of, it's definitely a cool color, but it's kind of gray and it's quite light. So I'll just put this in here. It's definitely darker than the sky, and as I go down here, it gets much darker because it's reflecting the sky up above. So right down here, this is reflecting the sky up here. Back here, it's reflecting more of the light that's towards the horizon. So down here, I need to make it darker. I have my spray bottle. This is an essential part of my kit when painting acrylics. See, when I sprayed that, then this wet paint will flow over this dry paint really nicely. A little darker down here. I don't think I'll worry about the ripples right now in the water. We'll just concentrate on these large shapes. Right back there, right now it's not reflecting the mountain. Just a few seconds ago it was really reflecting the mountain. But that light changes and changes constantly as the motion of the water changes. Okay, well, I got my big basic shapes in except for the boathouse. So let's take a few tones here and we'll create that warm colored boathouse down there. And there's a roof on top of that, which is kind of a green color, a very dull green color. Now the roof of that little boathouse is much bluer than the warm greens of the tree. So I'm going to add a slight bit of blue in there. When I don't know exactly what color to mix on my palette, when I look at the subject, I just say to myself, is this a warm color or a cool color? And that just helps me to decide, because it can be a cool color, but if it's next to a cooler color, then it appears as a warmer color. It's a little confusing, but here we have another boathouse right back here. And like I said, I'm putting these boathouses up slightly above this horizon line, just so they show up nicer in the composition. Look at the edge of this boathouse right there. Now I can see on the edge of this boathouse is basically white, but it's sort of a dull white, and of course it's in shadow, since the sun is now. But this reflection under that boathouse is quite a bit darker than the color of the boathouse itself. So here again, I'll just make this reflection slightly darker. A few more dark tones. My dark tones, of course, will be right in the foreground. The darkest areas of any painting like this will be in the foreground. So we have some dark areas right under the boathouse. Now I'll put in these details later. Still working with the big basic shapes for now. I pick up some green. Well, I've got this dark under the boathouse. I'll just take this again here and drag it down with some green in it to make this reflection right under the boathouse. And I'll soften that just with a light touch of my brush. Now here again, I'm going to pick up some of the color of my water again. And I'll take this brush right from over here and I'll drag this right across here like that. Wipe my brush off slightly, drag it again. That will give me these little ripples in the water that I see. And I'm just dragging these horizontally. I could spray my board some. That will help this paint flow over into this. And as we get down here, closer to the foreground, these ripples become a little more pronounced. And we'll do some of these ripples back here. This is really, now that I've got the basics done, really now it's a point where I start working on some of the details to refine this piece. I'm still using a very large brush to do this. Under the eaves here, this is dark. But now you see I haven't used much palette space here. I'm kind of mixing in the same general area. I have a lot of colors on my palette, but I really haven't used them all. And a lot of times I use a much more limited palette, but since we are going to get rain here in a little while, I thought I would give myself as much choice as I could to start on this. Now here is this little deck right alongside the boathouse. All right, let's work on the trees more. And I'll take my chromium oxide green and some cadmium red. Often if I want to get a nicer or a different green, I'll mix some red with it. Now this sky is dry to the touch. If I were to scrape it hard, I could scrape some of that off, but it's generally dry enough to paint over with, where these colors of this tree are not going to mix in with the background. It's one of the real advantages of using the acrylics. Let me see, some more chromium oxide green, some yellow ochre in here. I'll begin to lighten this. I want these dark areas to maintain. I want them to show up here, but I need to give this tree some form. So I'll lighten some of these areas around the edge and so on. This tree falls over this boathouse some, which gives a nice touch, gives sort of another dimension to the composition. I have to be careful I don't get too light in here, because I want to maintain this large pattern, this large shape of this painting. So I don't want to lose that large shape. Of course, I can keep putting in my dark colors as I go. I mean, I can just paint over them with dark colors again, but I don't want to, I try not to duplicate my own efforts. Oh, I love this overcast weather. It's just so pleasant to paint out here when it's overcast like this. Often when we're out filming like this, it just becomes so brutal. It just becomes so very difficult, but this is very nice painting out here today. Let's jump back and work on these mountains some more. Now that I'm at this point, I can see where some of these values and colors need some adjusting. So back here, first off, this mountain is too smooth. I need to give it a more ragged look. So I'll try and mix up that color again. And I think I'm going to cut down the intensity of this blue. Now here's another thing. I'd like to have my palette close to my painting. And I'm right-handed, so of course it's on the right-hand side. But having this palette close to the painting, now if I want to adjust the color in this mountain, I can look over here and I can see what color I'm using. If it were down here further, I could not compare these two colors nearly as well. So having the palette close to where the painting is can be very helpful. Now as I change this, I can see that this will need changing as well. But we'll get into that in just a minute. Okay, let's make this, I'll put a touch of green in here too. And we'll make this top of the mountain a little more ragged where you can see a few of the trees, because that mountain is not that far away. And I'll take some of the greens and let's blend a few of these greens up into this area here. I'm going to lighten this far mountain back here. Since I changed this color, it really affected the look of this one. So this one needs to be lighter to give that atmospheric perspective. And I'll keep that edge kind of soft back there in the distance. I'm going to put down my larger brush and go to a brush just 1 or 2 sizes smaller, and I'll mix some of my sky color again, sort of gray color, and let's put in a few of these negative areas, these sky holes. Now these sky holes need to be slightly darker than the sky itself. If I have them exactly the same value as this sky, they will appear to be lighter. And a couple reasons for that. One is there's the contrast between the light and the dark. It will make that appear lighter. And also between these sky holes and limbs, there are other branches and leaves and so on, which helped to diffuse that brightness. Now there's a couple of trunks back here. Let me grab yet another smaller brush. Let's put in a couple of trunks, and I'll just take some blue and some maybe burnt sienna there. Now these trunks don't show up very much, but one reason I want to put them in is so I know where to place some of the negative areas. I don't want too many trunks in here, but let's just put 2 of them in there. Okay, now when I paint my sky color again, I can put in some sky right around that trunk, right beside that tree trunk. And that will describe the tree trunk there. Put in a few more sky holes down here, which describe this mountain back here. And I'll mix a lighter color with my yellow ochre, mix that with some of the blue, and we'll describe the top of this mountain by adding some sky holes right in here.
On the next episode of Painting and Travel, Roger will finish the mountain lake painting, and we'll go and take a dramatic look at the lake from 2,200 feet above. We're going to visit a neat place called the Chimney Rock. It's 300 feet of vertical rock with a great view. I'll give you just a little taste of what's going to happen on the next episode.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.